today it's on pruning, okay? And pruning can be tricky, it's different. This is really a difficult one for you folks in Southern California, the desert, Scottsdale, Tucson. It's totally different than anywhere else in the country. We are much more like the Midwest or the East Coast or the South than we are, not even the South. We're more like the Midwest or the East Coast in how we prune things. We're truly a four-season climate. And so you need to prune things in sequence, or you'll lose your blooms from the spring, or you may not kill things, it may not perform the way you wanted. I have to get rid of the albatross in the room though, or the grill or whatever it is. There used to be a ginormous tree right here in the middle of the nursery, okay? I know you know it's not there. It was diseased, it had a cavity in it. We knew it was diseased, we knew it was dangerous, we knew, and it finally got to the point where before it caused damage or injured someone, or killed someone, that kind of tree kills people, we had to take it out of the nursery. Had a huge cavity, and so I called a favor. I could not do that myself. I had to call in favors, and the biggest gun I know in town, Grant Tibbett. He is the guy. And so I said, Grant, you've got to help me out. This thing, come tell me what it takes to get this thing out. That is a very dangerous proposition. I mean, it can take out your house like that. Grant's the best in town, and he's a certified arborist. So I said, Grant, I'm teaching a class. Would you come talk, arborist talk? Maybe we can understand what he's saying. He's already used some fungal Latin that I've never heard, so he knows all that stuff. He'll give us some inside tip, especially on the bigger jobs. And his company, he's the arborist for Jonny's Tree Service. Just a plug, they're not paying me. In fact, I paid them to cut down trees. And so you're seeing these huge logs around. And guess how old that tree was? It was about this big around. Give me a guess. How many decades?
300 years?
300? No. Way. It's a cottonwood, and the water table here is at 10 feet.
Oh.
It's in the water. Just over 50 years old. I was amazed. The rings on it was over my thumb. So it was putting on that kind of growth every year. So that's what cottonwoods and elms, there's certain ones that really grow fast, and when they're in their perfect environment, that's what it was. Lightning or something had struck it, caused a cavity. It was trying to heal over, but Grant actually stood up in the middle of this cavity about, I don't know, 10 feet off the ground, and he's like, he could have disappeared. So where'd you go, Grant? It's a huge cavity in the middle, more than we thought there was. So it's more dangerous than we thought it was at first. That's okay. Now you know what happened. Anyway, it's hard for me to, it's like my heart was ripped out when I had to take it down. The biggest blunder that I can advise you against, if you take a walk through the yard and you're seeing your lilacs, your forsythia, flowering quince, your flowering fruit trees like flowering plum, flowering cherries, crab apples, the buds on these things are huge. They'll start to crack and show color here in just a moment. I mean, literally within weeks, days. So by the end of this month, through March, April, first part of May, all the spring bloomers will be glorious. I mean, it'll be wow. I love spring. The daffodils will come up, they'll be blooming. It will be beautiful. The biggest blunder I find is, especially for you guys that have chainsaws, you know who you are. Yeah, equipment. Yeah, I can't stop. I must keep pruning. You folks need to be careful, because if you prune now, your lilacs and forsythia, those things that bloom in the spring, you'll cut all the flowers off. It'll be this beautiful shrub and no flowers. Of course, the reason that you plant a lilac is for that beautiful fragrance. I mean, your grandmother grew them. It just filled up the whole backyard. It's just beautiful. If you cut those off, there's no recovery until next year. And so wait, the spring bloomers, you want to write this one down, you bloom after they're done blooming. And yes, they'll be leafing out. It seems wrong, but you enjoy the fragrance, you enjoy the blossoms, then you cut them back. The summer bloomers, your Rosa Sharons, your crepe myrtles, your sages, all those things, Russian sage, you bloom. Summer bloomers, you prune now. Of course, they aren't budded, they aren't even pretending like it's spring. They'll be the last ones to wake up. They'll be, by April, people will be calling us going, I think my tree's dead. What's going on? I'm going, it doesn't like spring. Some things like summer. So you know who you are, right? Some of us are the same way. I'm a summer person. I don't like the cold. I don't like being cold. I'm a lizard. I like crawling up on a warm rock in the sun and going, warm me up. I love everything about summer. Some of you cringe thinking about that. Some of you going, I don't like the heat. I like the cold. I like to look out and sip my coffee and bake cookies and watch the winter go. Half of us are winter folks. Half of us are summer folks. Plants are the same way. Some plants love everything about spring. They love that pansies right now. Mine are, after the snowstorm, they're starting to come up and go, I'm so happy I'm going to bloom, even though it frosted on the windshield this morning. They like that. They love everything about spring. But a crepe myrtle, grapes. Some plants have no interest in spring whatsoever. They're waiting for it to be above 80. They want it to be above 50 degrees at night. And if you need a parka on at night, so do they. So it's just some plants like that. So those plants you prune now, summer things, prune right now. Fruit trees right now. The spring bloomers you wait to prune. And you'll be able to walk through the neighborhood and you'll know who blundered with that. Who the new people are from Southern California. You don't want to be that person. But we love you as a small business owner. Thank you for moving to Prescott, Arizona. And that's only half of you. Californians get the bad rap, but actually, we're from everywhere. Let's do a poll. Okay, how many are from California? Get out of the way. Not that many, see? How many are from other parts of the country? Yeah, everyone. So we're from everywhere. Colorado, Maine. Seems like Florida. Every time there's a hurricane in Florida, they move to Arizona. We love ice storms in the Midwest because they moved to Arizona. We love earthquakes in California because they moved to Arizona. As a small business owner, it keeps my tuition payments going to that fancy college my daughter goes to. So we're all from somewhere else. Even I am from Virginia. My parents retired here. I went to mid-high school, but I can't claim to be a Prescottonian or I would offend my wife, who was born here. So they're particular, they're persnickety. That's the biggest advice I can give you. The second one is, don't be afraid. Prune. You cannot make a mistake. If you Google it, you will be overwhelmed. You won't even know where to start. You'll be paralyzed. You cannot kill plants by pruning them. Right? Okay, you generally can't. It's hard to kill plants. I find people don't prune enough. You can fertilize your way out of any mistake. It will grow its way out. Don't be afraid. So kind of watch that one. So be on the more aggressive side. And I don't want to thwart your, I'll leave that, I'll set Grant up. This is my personal, maybe I'm talking more shrubs too. The last little bit of advice, and we'll pass the baton to Grant. We'll see where he wants to take us. This will be kind of casual. We'll have a lot of room for questions back and forth. We'll try to, you folks listening online, we'll try to repeat those so you can hear them. We'll see how this interacts. The last little bit of advice I can give you is on your hedges, mainly the number one, red tip photinia. That one I will wait. This is my own personal opinion. It doesn't matter when you prune them. You can't kill a red tip photinia. If there's a nuclear holocaust, there'll only be ants and red tip photinia that will remain. These things turn into 12, 15 foot by 15 foot beasts. Whole houses have been devoured by red tip photinia. Be aggressive on it. But when you're trying to cut them back, they can look a little mangy. I mean, they get those stubs. I mean, they just look butchered. I'll generally try to wait to prune those until right before I know they're going to flush new growth. So that'll be one of the last things that I prune. So I'll try to prune those the end of February, first part of March, because in March they start to grow again. So it just exposes them. It's mainly for me, so I don't have to look at them going, yeah, that's ugly. They'll grow, they'll push new growth. I think that's good for pyracantha, cotoneaster, all your hedgy kind of plants. I find that works really well. And then rosarians. How many rosarians do we have in the room? Any rose folks? How many have roses in their yard? Yeah, half the crowd, a lot of them. Roses grow here better than anywhere else in the country, literally. We have the cold for them, but we don't get the diseases that a lot of places get. The Midwest and South, terrible diseases, black spot, they melt with leaf disease. We're so dry, we don't have that. And so the secret is we've got a lot of influence from California into the deserts, because we have a lot of that. We're real close to that. They prune their roses in November and December, and January, in winter. We don't do that. Here, if you're pruning roses, you want to prune them in the month of March. March is the magic month. We want to get past most of winter, and then just before spring hits, that's when we prune our roses. And here's why. We want to keep the structure on top of those roses to protect the heart or the graft. Many of these hybrid teas, Floribundas, grandifloras, these are grafted plants. If that graft gets frozen solid, you'll revert back to whatever the rootstock is, which is some nasty, gnarly, the thorns come out like this and wants to rip your face off. It's not the rose you want. It's not the rose you bought. You want the grafted variety. So we're grafting a very elegant, beautiful, fragrant rose onto this hardy, robust rootstock. If you expose all of that, take all those canes off, and expose it to winter, and we get a hard freeze, it can damage that graft and it kills it. You revert back to the roots. If you wait till March, we're done with the hard freeze. Yes, we can still get frost. We will. Yes, we'll have maybe even a snow, but the hard freeze is over. And so you won't damage it. And it'll drive you crazy because the roses with this warm weather will start to leaf. You'll want to prune it. Just wait. Hold. This is not spring. This is here for today. Tomorrow it will snow and be another weather storm. That's how the mountains work. And so we kind of have this violent temperature swings going to spring. And so it'll be really nice, really bad. Really nice. It's not like this nice, light Minnesota spring where it just kind of comes out and it's, oh, we don't have that. It's a violent thing that happens. So you'll be tricked. Those folks you new to the area, realize the average last frost date for the mountains, right here, we've been tracking this for 100 years. The average last frost date, the local gardeners use Mother's Day as the kind of the holiday. I think it's May 8th specifically. Mother's Day is kind of where we go, oh, holiday. That is usually our last frost. Now, with that being said, 100 years of data, you know that the last frost is never on May 8th. It's either May 15th or April 20th. 50 of those days at the end of April. The other 50 is middle of May. I've seen it snow on Memorial Day. On Freaky. It doesn't feel like that kind of year. This has been a warmer winter. It's been wetter, but warmer. We haven't been down to single digits. My house, I think I've been down to 11 degrees. That's not that cold for the mountains. I've seen it go sub-zero. That's cold. Get in the car, you turn the blinkers on, it goes, whoa. So cold. That's cold. I don't like that kind of cold. But we can see that about every 10, 12 years or so. So just you should mark that date on your time frame. Pruning, I would say, don't feel like you're in a rush. You don't have to have it all out at the same time. I kind of take it as I want to be outdoors. The gardeners we haven't seen gardeners in the garden center for 2 weeks. Sometimes we have more returns than sales. It's just we've all been hunkered down inside, waiting for it to be like this. It got warm a couple days earlier this week, and you all have all been in the garden center. It's like this tidal wave of gardeners. And so pick a nice day. Do the pruning. Don't feel like you got to get it all, and then you can go back in a week or two, and then finish it up. So don't feel the rush. Okay. And then guys, if Lisa does not like me pruning. She's afraid. I always do it when she's visiting her sisters, getting her hair done, and then I go break out the big guns. But she likes everything to go wild. She likes jungles. I'm a formal guy. I like it. If I had it, I do Dr. Seuss, balls and squares, and that maybe is not ideal for here, because we have informal gardens, is how we actually, we're working with the forest. It's just more natural, but I think there's a way to prune it back so it looks natural, but is not squared. You engineers, computer folks, accountants, bookkeepers, I noticed nurses, folks with detail, they got to get it exact. You know who they are in the neighborhood because you look at their yard and go, chunk, 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 it's perfect. I mean, it's measured, and they got it perfectly laid out. That's called a formal garden. And sometimes there are some gardens that look very good like that. There's some places. My front garage, I have spiral junipers in beautiful, huge pots. And it accents, it says, "Welcome home, Ken. I'm so glad you're here." It's beautiful. And it gets my formal gardener out of the way, and it accents the pillars and that kind of stuff. So there's places for it. But the whole yard, maybe not ideal. He's going to knock that camera over, isn't he? There you go. With that, that's the main points I want. I want to make sure I give plenty of time to Grant, and I want to make sure we get plenty of time for questions. This is a general, we're going over 30,000 foot view here. Because I know there's some of you going, oh, I got my Virginia creeper, I got my grapes, or I got my fruit trees, or I got my hedges. There's so many questions. We'll give it to Grant, see where he goes. And make sure, did you bring cards and handouts and stuff? Did you get those? You did. They are a good company. I trust them. They're professionals. Especially if you have a big, nice home and you don't want to use your insurance. They have tremendous insurance, workman's comp, and all that stuff. They have all that. Not everyone has it. But mainly, lion's tail, where they, am I stealing your thunder? I really hate this. I pruned everything out except the ends of the branches because I don't have the equipment to do it right. And so they don't do that. And so that's a real bad technique, and it's really dangerous because they'll load up the ends of the branches and they'll break on you in the wind or the snow. Also crowning, where they just take out everything but the trunk and a few branches. That's hideous. The worst possible thing you can do for trees, and I'm sure that's offensive to you. Yeah, okay, good. So it's a bad technique, and Grant doesn't do that. I mean, just, there's a lot of people that own a pickup truck and a chainsaw. They call themselves gardeners or pruners. Verify before, don't trust. The reason that I'm in landscaping, I'm not in landscaping, I have been. Many of the landscapers, the reason they're in landscaping, because they owned a pickup truck and a shovel, and they couldn't get a job. So you want to really verify the work they're doing and make sure you know what you got. So ask neighbors, ask for referrals, ask us, and then if he doesn't make a mistake, it's not my fault. It's his. You should have, anyway. They've got contractors. With that, I'll give it up for Grant Tibbett, Jonny's Tree Service.
Thanks for coming out today. Like Ken said, my name is Grant. I grew up here in Prescott. I've been doing tree work in the green industry out west here for almost 12 years now. I guess the first rule that I really want to go over, or guideline, is going to be the right tree for the right place. We don't want to be planting, say, a mulberry right next to your house. That's going to get 50 feet across and 50 feet wide. We also don't want to be planting, say, a cottonwood right next to your giant greenhouse. That could possibly fall over. A tree in an appropriate place is going to need less pruning. It's going to grow correctly, it's going to grow how it's supposed to, and you're going to be doing less maintenance on it, which is going to be better for you, and it's going to make for a happier tree. So I'm a member of the Arizona Community Tree Council, and that's kind of the mantra we go by, is right tree for the right place. Two issues that Ken covered are topping and lion's tailing, which is, we see a lot of that here in Prescott, especially a lot of the old cottonwoods and elm trees. Like Ken said, topping is where you just bring it back to stubs. And a lot of the times that's just because, say, homeowners or pickup truck tree workers, they can't reach out to the ends. They don't have the right equipment, say bucket trucks or climbing equipment to do it safely. So they cut it where they can reach. When we top a tree goes, ah! And it goes into survival reaction. It's going to send off a bunch of sprouts. There's going to be a bunch of little shooters coming out on the ends of those stubs, and that's a survival reaction. We're taking all those leaves away, so it's trying to make food, so it's going to send out a lot of new growth. Those are called epicormic sprouts. Those sprouts, they may look okay when they're only 5 or 6 feet tall, but on a cottonwood, on an elm, those sprouts can reach to be 30, 40 feet tall. Now the difference between an epicormic sprout and an actual branch or limb is a limb is attached to the heartwood of the tree. It originated as that tree was growing. An epicormic sprout is a dormant node underneath the bark. It's pretty much a bud that's just asleep underneath the bark. When you stub them off, you wake those up and they start to grow. Those sprouts are the first things to come off in a windstorm, heavy snow load. They shed very easily. And when they're 30 or 40 feet tall, they can cause a lot of damage or injury to people. In a lot of cities, especially in the Pacific Northwest, topping is illegal. You can be fined very heavily. I could actually lose my certification from the ISA for topping. It used to be a pretty widely used pruning technique, but we've moved past that now. And again, lion tailing, taking all the interior growth out. Like Ken said, that's gonna put a lot of weight on the end. It's gonna make a lot more leverage on the interior junction of that branch. It also inhibits taper. Taper is like this microphone. We want it wide at the bottom and narrower at the end. When we're removing that interior growth, all that stuff on the inside, sugars are localized. So the food that those little sprouts make are feeding that part of the branch. When we remove all that, we only have growth on the end. So you end up with a long, heavy, skinny limb with no taper. It's a lot like holding a 5-gallon bucket of water. If I hold it out like this, my arm's gonna get really tired really quick. If you can bring it in, it's gonna be a lot easier to hold up. So top 2 pruning mistakes. I guess the next one would be 30% rule. There's a lot of 30% rules in tree work. When we come in and do pruning in the spring or summer, basic rule is we don't want to remove more than 30% of the live crown in one season. Like Ken was saying, pruning can be done in steps. We don't have to get everything done in one season. Once we see about 30% of the live crown on the ground, and that doesn't include deadwood, we can remove all the deadwood and be just fine, we should probably stop. By removing more than 30%, we're allocating a lot of that tree's energy just to healing over those wounds, and it takes away from its other basic functions. Now that rule can go back and forth. With an older tree, say some of these really big live oaks that we have around town, or really big ponderosa pines, we probably want to keep that down closer to 15%. An older tree is just like an older person. They're not going to heal as well or as fast as, say, a 13-year-old boy who rides his bike. Peaches and apricots, they like to be hit harder than that 30% rule. We can probably get within the 40 to 50% range, and they're going to come back with a vengeance. They like to be hit really hard. And then as far as another 30% rule, making reduction cuts. So say you have a limb that's extending over your driveway, over your nice new truck, and you're afraid it's going to crack off during a storm and come down. So we want to shorten that limb. Once again, it's like that 5-gallon bucket of water. We can take 5 gallons, we can say take 2 gallons out of that and make it a lot easier to hold. So we have your big branch and we have laterals coming off to the side. We always want to try to reduce that back to one of those laterals. That's going to enable that lateral to take over dominance and reduce the amount of sprouting that we have on the ends, just like topping. When we come back for that reduction cut, we want to make sure what you're cutting it to is approximately 30% of what you're removing. This limb back to reduce its end weight, to get some of that load off the end, and to bring it back away from our target here. So we don't want to cut it off here, because that's just a little whipper. All we're going to get is a bunch of this on the end, epicormic sprouts, and that's not going to help us a lot. A better limb to take it back to would say be this one, because that's going to be about 30% of this, of what we're removing here.
Ken, lower your hand. Thank you.
So 30% rule, and that's going to be the diameter of what we're cutting it back to in relation to the parent stem that we're cutting it off of. Another thing to keep in mind too is we want to have 30% of that biomass left. So say we have a real big limb here, and yeah, that would roll it really far away from the truck. That would keep it a long ways away. But that is not 30% of what we're removing here. So 30% diameter, 30% biomass. If we break that rule, a lot of the times we're just going to have sprouting on the ends, or we're just going to have branch dieback. Any questions on that?
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud. Fantastic. Do we cut evergreen trees the same way that we're going to prune a deciduous tree? And the answer is yes. Ponderosa pine is going to be the same rule. Each tree is going to respond differently, and a ponderosa pine is going to have a much different branch color. It's going to be more flush with the trunk than, say, a maple or a sycamore or a cottonwood would be. It's going to be a less defined branch color. A lot of the branch colors in ponderosa pines are actually going to be underneath the bark.
If you're in doubt and you're out pruning, iPad, click, bring it in. We can show you where to make the cut. And you'll see the collar. As you look at where branches come out, you'll see where the raised portion is. And you see that on the example Grant's passing around, but different trees have different collar sizes. The main thing is leave the collar intact. Don't cut it off. Don't cut it flush. Leave the collar intact so that it can seal over. That's the main and most important thing. Ken.
We have a question from one of our Facebook Live.
Oh, excellent.
people.
Hi, Facebook. Yeah.
The question is, when should I trim my lilac bushes?
Ken?
So lilacs, put them back right now. No, don't do that. You prune lilacs after they're done blooming. So prune lilacs after they're done blooming. Same with all the other spring bloomers. We kind of covered that a little bit. So enjoy the fragrance, enjoy the blossoms, then prune lilacs back. There you go. So probably in April, first part of May. Depends on the variety, but that's when you're going to prune them. It seems counterintuitive, but that's when you prune. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I planted a boomerang lilac and it didn't make it. What did I do wrong?
Oh, you're welcome.
Lilac question?
Oh, boomerang lilacs. What?
I planted it and it didn't make it.
Plant a new one. I've got some that just came in. Bloomerangs, now just a quick bloomerang lilacs. There's a new variety of lilac out. And I think it should be planted more here because it's dwarf. It doesn't get as big. It stays smaller. And mine bloomed 3 times last year. The secret with some of these really hardy varieties, we've had a really wet summer, more rain last monsoon, and we've had more snow, more moisture, depending on your elevation, here in winter. Some of those drought-hardy native, we like the native, it's something I don't have to take care of. Those things don't like wet monsoons and wet winters, and they can suffer and die. So a lot of times I would put the same thing with deodar cedars. They'll get real wimpy and they'll shed all their needles. They're crybabies. They get too wet, they're just going to let you know about it. And so they'll shed. Ceanothus, silverberries, there's a whole series of really tough plants that have been great during the drought. But now that we don't have a drought season, and the way the mountains work, Arizona works, is either feast or famine. You have no water or way too much. And so you get this huge swing. You need plants to be able to get through that. Lilac's the most important thing. Make sure you have a soil that drains. So I put mine, I'm on a north slope up at Eagle Ridge, and I have heavy clay soil. Heavy clay, it's the hardest gardening I've ever done. Heavy clay in the shade. That's horrible for drought hardy. I have tried 5 times to grow a manzanita. I love manzanita. I've given up. It's not going to grow in my backyard. It's too heavy clay, too wet, too cold. If I was going to grow one, it would be in the front yard, by the street, the asphalt, where it gets radiant heat, and I've got raised beds. So I can ensure the drainage gets more sun. So it could be a placement thing, and then watch your watering.
So you think I put it in the wrong place?
It may be in the wrong place, or the irrigation is set up to come on too often. And so
I
the
kept
two...
watering it.
Lilacs are considered drought hardy, which means that they have to breathe in between water cycles, whether it's nature or your drip system. They have to breathe or they'll drown. And if ever you're in doubt, you can bring the roots in. We don't need to see the whole plant. I don't need to see the dead twigs. It's dead. But the roots, we can tell a lot. It's like an autopsy. We can tell you if it's too much water, or I can teach you how to do it. It's basically, the roots should be paper white. Beautiful white. Perfectly white. If it's stained or streaked or brown or chocolate or has a slight odor like rotting sewer, those are all called root rot. And it's very prominent here. You're much more likely to kill things from overwatering here than you are from underwatering. Especially if your landscape is new. Because that contractor, he's a true contractor, he's on the hook for 2 years. He's supposed to replace it, warranty it for 2 years. Or his license is on the line. You can complain, you can put a ding on him. He's a contractor. That's the reason he has a contractor's license number. If he set that thing up to water every day for the next 2 years, just to make sure it gets enough water, and now you're putting some new things in, you're hand watering, it's really quick to have too much water on this thing. So kind of watch out. If in doubt, come talk to us. I've got a whole class on nothing but watering. Look for it. It's coming down the road. I think
So
April
you
got
have them now.
bloomerangs. Yeah, there's some beauties right now. They're loaded with buds. Don't turn them off. Okay, any other questions?
I had a question for Grant. We're in that situation where we've just moved to Prescott and we've got all new plantings. So we've got new fruit trees, new oak trees. When do you start pruning those, like the younger trees, I guess?
How long ago were they planted?
October.
October. I wouldn't touch them for probably 2 seasons, 2 years.
Okay.
The trees are just getting established. Now there's going to be there's very many growth hormones in trees. 2 of the most prominent are auxins and gibberellins. Auxins are produced in the root tips, or in the branch tips. Gibberellins are produced in the root tips. Those 2 work hand in hand. So if we go in on a new tree and start cutting those tips off or taking crown away, it's really going to inhibit the amount of root growth. I would probably let those trees go for a couple years before we started pruning.
Okay, and then the pinions, they just take care of themselves?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Essentially, yeah, they're native trees. They're made to grow up here. A lot of the times people say, oh, they're pinions, they're junipers, they don't need water. But they are native trees, they can survive without it. But any tree is going to do a little bit better with a little supplemental water. Especially our pre-monsoon season, say May, June, first part of July, the hottest part of the years. Those trees are going to go a long ways with just a little bit extra. We don't need to flood them, but just a little bit of help is going to go a long ways. It's just like when you see a pinion or juniper next to a creek bed, it's always going to look a little bit better than the same type of tree out in the rocks or out in the middle of the field. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I had 2 questions. The first one is, on your tree stump cut, your second cut is all the way through the branch and removing that.
Yes, sir. Your second cut is going to be, so this is your first cut, your undercut. Your second cut's going to be just outside, further out from that first cut. And that's going to keep it from tearing. If we were to do the second cut on the inside, your first cut's not going to do anything. It could still possibly tear. But yes, so your second cut is going to be just on the outside, and then your last cut is going to be all the way through to remove that stub.
Okay.
That's in the handout. That's kind of in great to you.
The next question was on if you're trying to look for fire-wise, prevent wildfires. So what do you recommend on pruning?
As far as fire-wise protection in your trees, a lot of the trees out here in the desert or high desert where we are designed to grow low to the ground and kind of in rounder shapes. A lot of the scrub oaks, white emery oaks, a lot of the native trees out here. So in a natural situation, fire would come through at a very low intensity every few years, and that's gonna raise those trees up naturally. It's gonna burn those branches off. When we come through and do fire-wise mitigation on lots, We're going to replicate that just with chainsaws. We're going to cut those lower limbs off and get them off of the ground. And what that's going to help with, if we do have a fire come through on the ground, it's not going to catch into those lower limbs and then carry into the crown of the tree. When we have a crown fire, especially on ponderosa pines and the big forest around here, that's when it really gets out of control, is when we have a big, high-intensity crown fire.
There's a whole class on just Firewise. Or if your community is Firewise community, you need a speaker. If your grant will come up and talk, I go and talk. So we're on the speaking circuit, we can help you with that. It gets much more detailed than what you just shared, 60 seconds.
I'm also a certified Firewise Communities Assessor. Firewise Communities is a nationwide program. I've taken classes down in Phoenix to assess your homes and your neighborhoods and to make sure they're not only safe, but we can keep them aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't need to look like a nuclear bomb went off in your yard to be Firewise. Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 redwood ash in my backyard, and I live in Quailwood and Dewey. We have a lot of watching place, so the house was built in 2005. The one redwood ash is taller than my house. It's only, the original planting was only about 14 feet from the back of my house. My problem is, I have no idea how deep that redwood ash was planted. And it needs trim. Do I have any other concerns with that tree being so close to my house?
As far as roots,
Repeat to the folks in the back.
Because actually, we couldn't hear.
2 Raywood ash.
she has 2 Raywood ash out in Quailwood, out in the Dewey area. One of them is taller than her house. They do get pretty large. And you said it's about 14 feet, within 14 feet of your house. So it's in fairly close proximity to your house. They will develop some pretty big roots. That's one thing to keep in mind if it's going to start lifting up any pavers or sidewalks near your house. Another really common problem with Raywood ash, when they first kind of came out, everybody thought they were going to be the greatest landscape tree for Arizona. We've kind of found now, I look at a lot of them in Dewey. Eventually, most of those trees are, almost all, actually all of them are grafted, like Kim was talking on, to rootstocks. A lot of the times you'll get a bad graft. And that's usually when you start to see tip dieback in the top of that crown, that's what's going on. The tree has outgrown its graft, and especially when you start to see a lot of suckers right at the base of the tree. That's a pretty telltale sign of a bad graft. Really, realistically, Raywood ash have about a 15 to 20 year maximum lifespan in a landscape situation. Also with Raywood ash, we have very narrow branch attachments. The best, strongest branch attachment is going to be roughly 30 degrees. A lot of those ash are right next to each other, and that's just kind of how they grow. It's nature of the beast. When they grow that close together, they develop a thing called included bark, is what we call it in our industry. If you look at your pointer finger and your thumb, you stick them together, it looks like it's attached way up here, but it's actually not attached till way down here. That wood never really fuses together, it just kind of pushes against each other. And like I said, those are really weak branch attachments. Now if you have some that are going to be 8 inches, 10 inches in diameter, when one of those breaks out, which they eventually will, it's not a question of if, it's when, those can start causing damage to your house. So pruning and training your tree, more so at a younger age, is always better, but to grow away from your house is going to be concerned. We can also come in and just do basic building clearance on your house to give your structure some space.
That's one, if you've got 2 trees and one's growing more aggressively than the other, it might be a time, that's when you want to pull an arborist in to do it properly and have them balance so they catch each other. There's a place for arborists and there's a place to do it yourself or have a gardener do it. That's one that maybe and it's not that expensive, really. Let me can you hand me that Sharpie right there? Yeah. Let me just go over a couple. All I heard his arborist speak was, get a good quality tree. You buy those from Waters Garden Center. Because there are different grades. The bad grafts are bad. And that's just bad. So we don't sell those here. Truly, we don't. We really go out of our way. In a nutshell, let's just go over pruning, okay? If you're going to start yourself, it's a mysterious thing. Where do I even begin? Grant mentioned on it, start with dead wood. Number 1, just get the dead stuff out. Dead stuff attracts disease. Just start with that. Many times, just by cutting a dead branch, out, you start to see where to start. Number 2, especially on fruit trees, especially your pitted fruits, cut out branches that are growing to the inside of the tree. So inside, pointing to the inside, cut. So cut inside growers, okay? There's some that just kind of clog up the whole inside, especially for fruit trees, apples. They're notorious for growing on the inside. They grow branch suckers inside. The plant wants to see some sunlight on the inside. It keeps disease down, keeps insect, leaf tip burn, curls on peaches and apricots. Has a lot to do. It allows breezes to come into the center and allows some sunlight to come in. That's important. That'll really open it up. We're going, oh, I got this. Next one will be any branches growing down. So downward branches. Can you read that? I'm better with a keyboard than I am with writing. But and you know what they are. Some of them you poke your eye out because, like maples, are notorious for having these long branches, especially your red maples, the most popular ones. Locusts, famous for growing down. So just prune those up. I'm 6'2". I do not want to duck when I'm walking through my yard. So everything is pruned up above 6'2". If you're 5'9", go 5'9". There is no rule on this. Do what's comfortable for you. And this gets confusing because we got so much agriculture. And when you read on the internet, prune it just this way, they're not after aesthetics or the artistic piece or landscape piece. They're after production, bushels per acre. They don't care about how it looks. They just want production because you're getting paid for the fruit. In your backyard, we kind of want both. We want beauty and production, and you can blend that together. So the first thing is just make it comfortable for yourself. So you can prune it up some. My evergreens. I'll prune my evergreens up off the ground. It's not natural, but I just want ease. And I want to be able to take my rake and go like this underneath it. So I don't go real high because that looks Dr. Seuss-like. That's I put it in the wrong place. And I had to prune it up to get it out of the driveway. That's a wrong placement. I put them in the right place, but I just want ease of care. So I'll take that first layer, a big swooping branch on a deodar cedar or a spruce or a pine, and it's purely for my benefit, not for aesthetics. And I find that from a distance, no one can tell, but my life is easier. I love it when my life is easier, so I'll just cut that back. So let's see, downward branches. Oh, then we get into, I'll just shape it. Then we get into just give it a haircut. I'll just write haircut. Okay, and then there's a branch coming into the walkway, but it's too far. I'll cut it back by a third. So I'll cut it back by some, just to comfort. Sometimes a shrub will be way out over here, and out over here gets more sun or something happened. The snow right now has got some deformed. So we just had our church call us going, I don't know, these deodar cedars they're starting to bend over. It's snow damage. Take some bamboo and set it back up and tighten it. It will grow it up again. And so there's some things like that, just shaping and making it look more natural. That's kind of the last step. Many times we do all these steps in reverse. We start by shaping, then it gets too crowded, and then we forget to pull the dead wood out. Just get them in this order. And I find pruning is much easier as far as the process goes. It's much easier to sort through the completed project. Okay? Does that make sense? Does that help you? Just where do I even begin? Again, if in doubt, iPads and phones, a quick picture, we can do a lot. We can zoom in with those devices. We probably look at 10 different devices just myself every day. Just new technology is actually really great. Okay? And then suckers at the very last piece. Some trees are more suckery than others. That is, the wild things that come from the roots that you really don't want. There should be one branch, but now there's 3 or 4 coming up. Some crab apples are notorious. If they've got real heavy clay soils, they'll tend to sucker more. That's when take those out at the very end. Okay? Take the strongest one and make that, commit to that strongest one, cut all the others off. So all the energy goes to that one remaining tree. If you've got suckers, now it's competing for all the foods and waters, and so you don't have, none of them are strong because they're all competing with each other to get some food and water. So cut those things off. Also, if it wants to sucker a lot, be aggressive. A nice clean cut on a sucker will resucker quickly. I like to rip them off. I mean, I like to be brutal, just a ragged, jagged, gnarly cut. I mean, lawnmower. That's a good cut because it's less likely to sucker. Even on your own skin, you know, so a nice clean cut heals right up. Well, a jagged cut takes months. Same with a sucker. Think in those terms. I think it'll help you with some of those. Okay, suckers are bad. Also, if this tree is lifting those fancy new pavers, I think we need to think in terms of pruning roots more often than just the top growth. Pruning is not just top growth in my world. If it's starting to lift a stem wall or cracking that wall or lifting your house, this tree out here was starting to lift the greenhouse. Literally, it was lifting the greenhouse. So it's pavers, walkways. It was really aggressive. It was trying to compensate for its illness. It was hollowed and damaged and diseased inside. It was trying to compensate for that. Part of the reason we had to have it go, it was becoming dangerous. I think sometimes you need to open up and figure out where that root is and root prune. Don't let it. These big aggressive elms, cottonwood sycamores. There's some that are very large, very aggressive trees, willows. Maybe you need to find out where that root is going and prune it, root prune it. Don't let it grow under the house. That's not going to be good for you. Just root prune it. The Midwest gets it. The East Coast, they're constantly root pruning as much as they are top pruning. I think we need to think in those terms as well more often. So if it's lifting your pavers, don't let it destroy pavers. That's expensive. Paver pathways, don't let that tree destroy it. Cut it. It's not going to harm the tree. Okay? Grant, do you do root pruning? I'm sure you can do whatever you need for trees and arborists. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. We can do that. We can come in and prune roots. As far as root pruning at home, there's not as many rules as pruning the crown. You can whack that root off wherever you want, and like Ken said, it's not going to hurt it. It's just going to invigorate more fine root hairs, which are actually what are doing the actual work for the tree. The fine absorbing roots are the workhorses. The bigger ones are more as storage units. And we can also install root barriers as well.
A general rule too on pruning, 30% of the foliage mass, or I try to go a third, but Grant said 30%. The book actually does say 30%. I just go a third. In the winter when it's dormant, or once you're really aggressive, you can prune up to 10% of the foliage mass whenever you want. That's a branch growing out over the walkway and in the way. It's growing down and wants to hit you in the head. That's a light haircut. You can prune anytime, midsummer. Get it out of the way. Don't let it be. You don't have to wait till midwinter before you can prune it. 10% anytime you want. A third of it basically now, in late winter, early spring. That's a general rule that works for most things. Okay? All the way in the back. How deep does you get it?
Yes, ma'am. Her question was, how deep does a root barrier need to be? Usually we go 2 to 3 feet. The majority of roots, 80% of roots aren't going to be more than 3 feet under the ground. 90% of those roots are going to be in the top 12 to 18 inches of soil. And that's with just about everything. There are a few desert dwelling trees like mesquites that are going to have a taproot that's going to search out really deep hidden water. Everything up here is going to have a fairly shallow root system. So it's not like the old pitchers where it's got a real big root that goes down. It's going to be wider and shallow. A lot of these ponderosa pines are going to have roots that go 4 times the width of the
drip line.
Drip line, thank you, Ken.
I call it the hockey stick. You'll see massive trees. I've dug out old aspen, just trying to move them. And it puts a taproot down about 18 inches, turns, and then goes like this. Because there's nothing down there for them. There's no water, there's no food, there's nothing deep for them. They're going surface. They're looking for monsoons, water during those cycles. They're trying to pull up as much surface water as they can. So the roots are really only that deep. That's why when we encourage when you plant a new tree. In fact, I put on my list, give you the summer pruning now, the pruning cuts, and then the tree list. I'll give you the top 10 tree list. So you'll get 3 emails. When you plant those, we encourage not that deep a hole, but a wide hole. Go wide, because we know the roots are going to go this way, not down. Unless you're in Dewey or Mayer, or where you got caliche layers. If you got caliche, which is basically cement layer going through the rock, through the soil, it's like a chalky, very, very dense soil. You've got to fracture that at least so the water can go through it. Other than that, go wide, not deep. I'm sensing a question right here.
I've moved into a house with a large, what I assume is an old desert willow. And there is a couple of big fat roots that are on the surface.
Yeah.
You know, like the rock lawn won't stay over it. Is that a sign that there's some problem with that tree, or is that just the way they grow?
No. Repeat for everyone in the back.
The lady here says she has a desert willow, and she's seen a lot of large surface roots, buttress roots. Those are the ones that are going to be the storage units that are holding the tree in the ground. That's good. That's what we want to see. We want to see roots on the top. It may not necessarily be the best thing for your yard or tripping hazards, but it's going to be the healthiest thing for the tree. We want to see a big root flare. So these are our roots. This is the trunk of the tree, and here's the ground. You know, what we don't want to see is a trunk sticking out of the ground that looks like a telephone pole. That's the sign of a bad installation, a bad planting job. That's going to lead to a lot of root rot and diseases in the base of the tree. This root flare is one of the most sensitive areas of the tree. It's responsible for a lot of gas exchange, cell differentiation, and if it's buried up to here, those roots are that much further down. They're not getting oxygen, they're not getting as much available water, and that's just going to cause issues. So seeing that root flare and some surface roots, that's a good thing.
That's not what she wanted to hear, though. So, the bottom line, can she cut that root off, part of it, to flatten it out? Or could I bring more rock in to hide it? She wants to be able to rake, and she wants it to be underground. Can she have her cake and eat it too, or does she have to leave those roots exposed?
No, she does not need to. I would probably recommend either bringing in rock or mulch, just something that's going to allow air and water to move through it and then eliminate those tripping hazards.
What I encourage is your watering is critical, especially when the tree is new. You need to deep water. I find that this is hard for folks that come from flood irrigation areas, or they just flood all of a sudden. Old irrigation districts in the Verde, down in Phoenix, folks in California where they just let it free flow to Sacramento. You don't even have water meters there. You just let it flow and then you forget about it. Here we're doing drip irrigation, and I find that we don't leave the drip emitters on long enough to get the water pushed down deep enough, so we encourage deeper roots. And so we find that we have trees with very, very, very shallow roots that'll cause more of this surface root going on. So watch that, especially when they're new. Make sure you keep this drip system on hours, not minutes. Because it's got a 1 gallon per hour emitter head. It's got to be on for an hour just to get 1 gallon of water. And this 15-gallon tree needs 15 gallons of water a week. You need to either have multiple emitters or leave it on for hours and hours, or a combination thereof. We've got a whole irrigation class. And I'm trying to line up with a landscape company now that kind of come in and teach us the best techniques. But that's one thing to watch is the irrigation piece. It makes a big difference, so on new trees especially. Now, we're down to 1 hour, just over an hour. You wanted to walk around, show folks, which not everyone's going to want that. Why don't we take 2 more questions? Because I sense that they can go, yeah, I sense that, yeah. Take 2 more, and then we'll answer more questions on the fly. Maybe we can get your professional eye in the front landscape, or tell me where to make the cuts on that Catalpa or something, or we'll take a walking thing so we can see what the professional sees in the landscape. Does that seem okay? Yeah. So we'll take 2 more, 1 question in the back, and 1 in the front, person in the red. What do you got?
I have a Raywood, and I can see the root going around the tree. Should I cut that off or not? Is there not enough water?
So repeat the question. So.
This gentleman has a Raywood ash, and he's seen a circling root going around the base of the tree. That's called a girdling root, and that's one thing why you should buy your trees from Ken, who works at.
I was going to say that. It drives me crazy.
Ken hand picks the best nursery stock he can find. A lot of the times in a bad nursery, they're going to leave that tree in a 5 or 15 gallon bucket for too long. And by the time they pull it out, those trees hit the edge of that bucket and they just start to circle. When they pull it out, they should be root pruning and directing those roots back out when they move it to a larger container. Also, your landscaper or whoever's installing your tree should be looking for that as well. A lot of the times, landscapers just aren't educated enough or have the correct training, and they just get stuck in the ground and they go to the next house. So when you stick that tree in the hole, those roots are going to continue to circle and do the same thing. That not only makes for a less structurally stable tree, but eventually as that trunk expands in diameter and that root expands in diameter, it can actually just girdle your tree. It's like leaving a staking wire on there for too long, and it's just going to choke your tree off and kill it.
Can you root
That-
prune and prevent that?
Yes, ma'am. You can root prune that. It's better to catch them earlier. I just take a sharp wood chisel and a mallet and just pop it off on both sides. You don't necessarily need to pull that root off the trunk. You can end up causing damage like that, but just cut it on both ends. It'll kill the root, and eventually that tree will push it off on its own.
It'll also send off more root hairs where you made that cut. It'll send off correct roots. The main thing, all I heard him say, buy your tree. There actually is a difference. A tree is not just a tree. That is a myth. There are different qualities. Like in everything, we know this. There's different qualities. And so you don't want a tree that's root bound or
Well, how far away from the trunk would I do that?
how far away should he prune it? So it's curve going around. Wherever you see it, cut it. That's what I would say. You don't have to go down to China. Just get some, it'll compensate. If you start to make some cuts, you'll start sending some roots in the right direction. So you didn't get the tree from Waters Garden Center,
I
did you?
did not.
I didn't think so. I know where you got it from, actually, so. And then one up front. This row's been, we gotta go here, because we've not heard from this row, so go for it.
I have a peach tree that I bought last year from Waters, and the thing it's a new tree, 15 gallon, but it has gone so crazy with its growth, it's so happy. It's got a lot of growth going inside. Is that possible? Should I cut the inside growth or not because it's too young?
Just like this. So cut deadwood, which doesn't sound like you have any, because the gardener's got that healthy tree with a green thumb taking care of it. It's gonna go, that's good. Cut the inside growth, thin out some of the insides, and those suckers open it up.
Even though it's a new plant,
Even though it's
it's
a
a
new
year
plant.
old.
Yeah, generally, like Grant said, apricots, nectarines, plums, those pitted fruits, they go crazy. They love growing here. So also I would say, I'll end with this, and then we'll take a walking tour. Okay, so those of you that want to go after this, don't leave yet. I want you to clap for Grant first, and then we'll do a walking thing. But I think sometimes we have too high an expectation for our landscapes. There is a life cycle to plants, and it is not for eternity. We don't live in the Garden of Eden anymore. We don't live forever. It's not going to happen. There is a cycle when we got to just say, this tree is ugly, or plant or shrub, or it's half dead. You gardeners have a hard time with this. Going, I can bring this thing back to life. I'm telling you, you cannot. You can't bring, or it will take so long that you'll be dead before it finally gets looking good again. Don't let a plant bring you down in the landscape. The landscape is meant to uplift. We got a $500,000 house. It's meant to accessorize and show off your house, not bring you down. So if your neighbors are driving by and mocking your half-dead tree, I think you need to call Brandon and just cut this thing down and start over, because I know where you can buy a new luxury, new tree that will be gorgeous, but grow like crazy. So I think we need to be realistic. There is a definite cycle how long these trees will last. I would say aspens, the #1 selling tree here. #1 tree, 20 years at most. Really more in the mid-teens is how long an aspen lives. Okay? It's not meant to be forever. Now, it can sucker and come up and have another branch come up, but that main mother, the core trunk, 20 years most. You're probably going to be thinning that thing down.
What about
Maples, the same way. Apples, the whole, you name it. Some things are shorter, some things are longer. If in doubt, bring an iPad in, and I can tell you if it's ugly or not. You already know what the answer's going to be. You're going to ask me, is it time for this thing to go? The answer is more than likely yes, and that hurts me because I got this beautiful, magnificent cottonwood. It's magnificent. But there was a season when I went, this thing is becoming dangerous. I'm going to have 30, 40,000 people go through this place. I can't, it would be irresponsible of me to keep it intact and not make the call. In a commercial setting. In your backyard, maybe it goes longer, but you got to make that call. So don't be afraid if it's ugly or if you just don't like it. It's not a puppy dog. It's a plant, and you can replace it. And let me just, while I'm on my soapbox, that poinsettia you got for Christmas, if that thing has shedded all of its leaves, it is meant to be thrown away. Get rid of that thing, okay? If you're at your attorney's office or accountant's or whatever, and they got this ugly thing because they got a gardener in the front office, buy them a new house plant. Let them, it doesn't need to be around. I think that plant, we need to get over ourselves sometimes, and I know it's still alive, but it's not breathing very well. When you just take it off of life support and go, you know, it's been a good run, but time for you to go to the upward bound level. So just kind of with that. Okay, let's give it up for Grant. I really appreciate